All right, Colin. Well, thank you so much for joining the Worth Wellness podcast today. I'm really excited to have you on, especially to talk about ancestral living, because we haven't really dived deep into that yet on the podcast. And I see you as a pioneer doing great work in this area. And I wish there were more companies like
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I just got my next pack of Cocoa Tropic today, right before I sat down. I was so thrilled.
Love it. Yeah, we hear that a lot. We have people that sometimes just put that with just water. And I'm like, I like it with coffee, but I mean, just hot water, if that works for you, that's great. You know, no sweetener, nothing.
Yeah. So could you share with our listeners just a little brief overview of who you are and what you're about, and then we'll dive into the deep stuff.
Yeah, this is always a hard question because I mean, it's like, how far back do I go? You know, poker player, entrepreneur, business owner.
Oh, wow.
Moved to Austin from Florida. I've just had a very eclectic evolution. And so now I'm in Austin and I've been doing Wild Foods for 5 years. I had a CrossFit gym back and forth. So I was always into health and fitness. And I was just like, Florida's kind of, you know, I grew up there. So when you grow up there, it's kind of boring. You want to go to greener pastures. And so I figured maybe I'll go to California. I'm glad I didn't go to California, by the way, but I ended up in Texas, and Austin was on my list because, you know, the Paleo convention every year. And I had some friends that went to that every year, and they just talked about Austin being an amazing city. And so I basically went sight unseen, never been, packed up my car, got an Airbnb. And then I was like, oh, you know, I think I'm going to stay here. And then that was like right as I had the idea for doing something new. I wasn't really sure. And then kind of through the, you know, 20-hour drive, thinking about, you know, maybe food supplements, what could I do to impact a lot of people, have a bigger reach with, you know, health and food and nutrition. And then, you know, just, you know, as it goes, like the idea of Wild Foods came to mind. And then I've looked at some of the products that I was using. So for example, whey protein, I was, you know, using a ton of it. I was getting into coffee at the time because I never grew coffee growing up. So I was getting into bulletproof coffee. Right. And then I just like one product at a time, I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't really know where these ingredients come from. Like the package on any food product it leaves a lot to be desired. Right. Like maybe there's the origin on there, but there's nothing about anything beyond that. How it's shipped, how it's packed, how it's made, you know, the processing, nothing. And so I was thinking, like, if I could get these products and really like get to know the manufacturer, even down to the farm level.
Yeah.
Like, where's it coming from? Where are the cows eating the grass? Are they eating the grass? For how long? Et cetera. Like every little detail that now, you know, even 5 years later, there's a lot more awareness around. Back then, it was still kind of a new thing. I mean, even back then, I remember Amazon was just like, you could kind of get all your stuff on Amazon, but that was becoming a newer thing. Now you can just literally go to Amazon for everything. Right. Yeah. And so I took that Amazon wave up, and I just launched one product at a time, following that obsessive sourcing standard. And, you know, we've been growing like crazy since then. And then, so now I've been able to, as CEO, having a team, I've been able to spend more time on content, podcasting, things like that, and getting these big ideas out there. Like, you know, sugar's bad for you. Fat's not bad for you. You know, eat more clean animal products, like regenerative agriculture, et cetera.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All the things I love. I'm so excited to talk with you about it. So I didn't realize that you were raised in Florida, but could you go back to like the beginning and maybe share with us what your nutrition and kind of food background was growing up? Like, is it anything comparative to ancestral living or totally different?
No, it was probably similar to a lot of, you know, guys in my demographic. It was, okay, I'm young. I want to get in the gym. I want to be fit. I want to be lean. I want to be strong. You know, a lot of guys want to be jacked. I was just okay being, you know, skinny and fit. Right. I knew that was never going to be my future. And so when I made the connection though, after being in the gym, you know, basically a gym rat for almost 2 years, working out with some of my buddies from high school, I was thinking to myself, well, I can't get rid of this kind of stubborn 10 pounds, like kind of mid handles, love handles, that area. It was always kind of stubborn because I have this interior pelvic tilt thing where my hips kind of bend forward. So like my lower abs never really come out of hiding. And I was like, this is really frustrating. And I was like, I'm training 2 hours a day. I'm sleeping pretty well. I'm taking supplements. I think I'm eating clean. And just through that obsessive kind of search for like, how can I lose this last 10 pounds or lean up a little bit? I stumbled on the paleo diet. Now, this was when I was in CrossFit for a good year. And I mean, I was training a lot. I was probably even overtraining. And so it's, you know, very telling to people that I see overtraining all the time and they wonder why they're not losing the last 10 pounds. That's a whole nother topic, you know, but when I made the connection from the food I ate, like, and the quality of it, right? So the sourcing and buying the real raw ingredients, cooking myself, not eating out of a package, cutting out all grains, legumes, and really watching my sugar intake. I mean, literally overnight, like we're talking 30 days after struggling for 2 to 3 years to get to that like final level. I, in 30 days, got it done. And I'm just like, okay, there's something here. Like why is nobody talking about this? Why is this not a bigger thing?
And
Right.
that was
And
on
so for me, it
Paleo?
became food quality.
Yeah.
That was a big thing. And so since then, it's always been quality, 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 quality.
Yeah. And so how old were you at the time? Was that in high school, would you say, or college, or what?
No, I was probably around 22, 23. So that was the
Okay.
evolution, getting into fitness, Gold's Gym route, bodybuilding, men's health, reading all those magazines, doing all the absurd things that they recommend, eating like maybe sandwiches that I thought was okay or good or whatever, taking, pre-workouts and all this crap. And I got stuck, right? Like I got stronger, but I didn't really get that leanness I was looking for because I had all these other things going on, like stress and probably eating too much sugar, probably eating too much grains, probably had gut inflammation, and all the things that come with that. And like paleo for me was like, oh, wow. Okay. If our ancestors lived this way for, 200,000 plus years, they ate, this bucket of foods, which a lot of people try to debate all the nuances of. I just kind of focus on like, what are things we know for sure? What are first principles? And so that directs everything I do. First principles are they would have never eaten out of a package. We know that for sure. First principles are we would not have eaten massive amounts of monocrops because they weren't available, right? We didn't have the machinery to even do that, right? And so everything up into before 10,000 years ago, when we started farming, that's when everything changed. And then you can go really deep into the rabbit hole of all the different changes and everything. But the very simple premise as a first principle is when we were hunter-gatherers, we had robust health. We had no chronic disease. I mean, it just literally applies to everything. And this, fast forward 10 years, the Ancestral Mind, the podcast, the more I think, what did my ancestors do? And what am I doing today? And are they congruent or not? Are they mismatched or not? And then I can make tweaks so that I can take my modern environment with all the, luxuries of running water and AC and all these things, right? And I can also go outside and sweat and get in the sun and exercise and pick heavy things up and cook my food and control everything. And I can be as optimally healthy as I can today by trying to learn from the past. It's not like a reenactment. I'm not going and living in the woods. I would never do that. Right. But I'm trying to understand the things that are the big bugaboos, like the big things like sugar, processed grains, food that's been cooked by a corporation, packed and shipped, right? All these different things. And then obviously sitting in front of a screen all day, not moving, even things with like eyesight, my eyes were getting bad because I was staying in front of a computer for years on end. And I dug into that a little bit and found out that most of the eyeglass industry is a scam, but I won't get into that.
Oh dear. Yeah.
It's like, it's just crazy when you see how much of the modern world is really just profit corporate driven versus, the advice of eat healthy, go outside, move. Like you could pretty much do that for free other than maybe the food aspect, right? Yeah. Everything else, gyms, training, coaching, all these things, like they're good at, in some instances, but they're very they're over marketed and people think that they need a coach or a guru or a special plan or secret information or something to save them or to get them to where they want to go. And it's completely and utterly not true. Right? Like it's just not even close. And we can obviously pull on those different threads depending on what you want to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, the weirdest example, because growing up, I never worked out in a gym. It was always just at home, but my husband did. And so when we first got married, we'd start to go to the gym together, and literally on the counter at the welcome desk is a bowl of Tootsie Rolls. And I just thought to myself, they can't really be for your health here. Like what is
the dentist used to give out lollipops after you went to the dentist.
Yeah.
I remember that as a kid. Can I have a lollipop now? I got my teeth cleaned.
The incongruency. I mean, it's mind blowing. So I can totally hear what you're saying on that. So as you began to look into where your food was coming from and what was actually in it, what were some of those shocking discoveries that you found that, like you said, the package doesn't really say a lot. So you have to dig deeper to find that information.
Yeah, this is it's a huge topic. There's so much complexity. I mean, there's a couple things. People think that the government is out to save them or protect them. And I just, as a general first principle, I tell people that if you rely on the government for anything, it's a very risky proposition. You have to take your health into your own hands. You have to take your sourcing of your food into your own hands. You should get to know your farmer. You need to do everything because some little label on a package that was made in halfway around the world and in a factory, and it was sat in maybe a tanker for this long, and there's mold and there's this and there's that. And the company itself has a profit motive. So maybe they don't say the things. I mean, the FDA doesn't go around and inspect food facilities every day. Like usually it's like a quarterly or 6 month or even yearly audit, and they kind of walk around, do whatever. And there's so many ways around this if you have money or power, right? So it's like that's a whole kind of hornet's nest of just nonsense that goes on. And some people could call them conspiracies. I just call them, actually, this is a good way to put it, especially in 2020. I call them accidental conspiracies. Okay. So,
Right. Yeah.
so you have a bunch of profit motives, you have a market, and you have things like convenience and demand and consumer interest and taste, and humans now, corporations have figured out how to basically addict humans to food. I mean, there's guys that get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just to make food addictive.
Yeah.
Right. And that, again, like, when you're eating out of a package, when you're letting a corporation manipulate flavors and things, and you remove the nature of it, like you completely remove from nature, you're gambling with your health, right? And from what I've seen, it's always going to be a health consequence when you go down that route.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember what the original question was, but that was
Yeah.
something along those lines.
Some of your shocking, discoveries that you found when you were looking
Oh yeah, I mean,
further
I'm
into
trying
it.
to think of some specific ones. Like, we sell food and supplements, right? And they both kind of have their own tricky things you have to navigate. And I can just tell you that if I wanted to get away with stuff, like, it's not hard.
Yeah.
Right. But for me, I've made for me, it's not the right thing to do. I care about my customers. But also from a long-term business kind of strategy, if customers don't enjoy their product, if they don't feel good after they take it, if they don't feel good when they consume it, and if they don't build it into their routine on literally a monthly basis, then I don't have a long-term business model, right? So that's my strategy for it. I'm not just trying to game like Amazon and get a bunch of sales and put crappy ingredients in. And a lot of people do that in the market, right? So it's like, at the end of the day, those guys might get ahead of you in the short term, but they're always going to flame out in the long term. So for me, it's a long-term thing. I want people that, like you said, you love the cogotropic, right? Like, that's a key word I try to think of. So when people come to me and say, I love this product, I know that even every chance I get to put another PO in with my manufacturers, I try to maybe even see if we can add or improve something, right? Rather than always trying to cost cut. Like, so it's just like thinking about, what you're paying for your ingredients and like being willing to pay more. That's always been a kind of a sign for me of quality. Like, I tell people sometimes, I'm like, you should see what I pay for my raw materials. Cause I guarantee you that thing of Hershey's cocoa powder on the shelf that costs literally 10 cents a pound, and I'm paying $3 a pound for my organic fair trade single origin from Peru. It's like, they're not even the same thing. But some people that don't really understand that, they'll just cost compare. Right. So, when it comes to food, you should never cost compare. That's just my opinion.
Oh, I agree entirely. And I do feel like it's frustrating sometimes that it looks like, or people have this conception that eating healthy is so expensive, I can't afford to do it. But it's also, not doing so makes you dependent on modern, like, I don't know, going to your doctor because you have these health concerns.
Yeah, there's a lot of downstream expenses from eating cheap food, and it's not as fulfilling, and there's not as much minerals, not as much nutrition.
Oh yeah.
It's just a short-term mindset when you think about it. And you eat more, you're snacking all the time, right? I can eat one meal a day. I could do OMAD if I wanted to. If I really needed to cut back, I could do one meal a day. And I would say, I mean, the amount of, like, when I buy fruits and vegetables, for example, or anything, the stuff that goes bad in my fridge just because it doesn't get eaten, there's so much food waste, right? And so I just think people don't do a full calculation of everything when they kind of bring up that. It's just a lazy argument.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. So I am curious though about just from your perspective, and like you said, there's a lot you don't know if you're not actually in the industry. Like, how do you know that a company's like giving you an actually good product? Like, they haven't cut corners. Like, I notice you focus a lot on transparency, and you're not going to put a product out there that you wouldn't personally use. So I feel like that's something people can see. But
that, again, that could be marketing hype, right? I could just say that.
How do you know?
Right.
How do you know?
Well, there's a couple ways. For me, honestly, it comes down to listening to your body, right? If you're taking cogotropic and it's got, raw cocoa, it's got some medicinal mushrooms, got these things. If you take that consistently every day for 30 days and you feel worse, or maybe you don't feel anything, it doesn't add any benefit or anything, then maybe that's not for you, or maybe the quality's not there, or whatever, right? So literally, your body is your best gauge of quality. I found, like, you can pretty much, after using a product for long enough, your body will intuitively tell you what's quality, right? And then beyond that, you can ask for COAs and testing and things, and it's tricky because in some ways you have to have faith, and that's why the entire Raw Foods brand is built around trust, because you can't know everything. Like, there's certain proprietary things that customers might want to know. I wouldn't even be able to tell them for legal reasons or whatever, right? And it's like, some facilities let you come to the facility and you can do things like that. When you're a bigger company, of course you can afford that. A company like mine, that would never even be viable for us, right? And so, there's just a lot to it. I guess, track record, consistency, product reviews on Amazon, when like thousands of people like the product, maybe that social proof is a good sign. You can ask for like COAs and get things like that and testing. There are third-party certifications here and there, but those, in a lot of cases, honestly, you can just buy them. I mean, it's really unfortunate,
Really.
you know, but it's just like, you have to really trust, you know, and that's why I put my face out there, because people can know that, like me, I'm online. My son's on my social media sometimes. Like, I try to really put myself out there. It's like, if I'm putting out poison in the marketplace, you know, you could come find me. I live in Texas, right? So if you really wanted to, go for it, right? So it's like,
Yes.
I'm not hiding behind a label or brand or hiring influencers. Like, I'm out there in the front of the lines because, like I said, you said, if I don't use it, I won't sell it. And that's just, for me, the gold standard, because I'm not going to put my name or my face on something that I don't believe in and that I'm not willing to even give my son. We have the golden milk product we just launched. My son likes to eat it out of the container. He just literally says, golden milk, golden milk, golden milk. And we put it in milk sometimes for him, but he'll just eat out of the container. It's like, I would not let that happen. And that wasn't on social media. That's just something that happens at the house. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Oh,
So you just really have to trust the people and the brand, to the best you can. And that's why they say get to know your farmer. Because a lot of farms, we had Joel Salatin on the podcast recently, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, so cool.
He made a good point. Go to the farm. If farmers don't invite you to a farm, this is kind of a funny heuristic he said. If you've been going to a farmer's market, let's say, and you've bought from the same, beef guy a couple times, if he doesn't ask you, or she asks you to come to the farm within like a couple visits, then it might mean they're trying to hide something. He was kind of saying, like, that's kind of a sign of quality. Like, they should be willing for you to come out. And if you ask to come out and they make up some excuse, maybe that's a sign as well. And then he even took it a step further. When you go there, just look, is it nature? Is it natural? Is it clean? Or is it everything broken down? Is it just look kind of dirty? Like, that might be a sign of what's happening with your food, or maybe the slaughtering process or whatever, right? So there are a lot of these cues you can pick up, and just trust your intuition and trust your taste buds and how you feel, and that will, you'll be able to kind of connect all the dots.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that too. Like, how does your body actually feel? Because I know, I mean, I've been into health products for a very long time, but like some stuff, it's like, I actually don't even like, this is supposed to be a health food, but I don't feel good. Like, so what's happening here? So I love that. And I think a lot of us are very out of touch with that. It says it's healthy, so it should just work. And, we just disregard how we might actually feel, or don't pay attention and tune into that.
There's a lot of variables. And then you have different minerals and absorptions and gut issues. And sometimes, like, maybe you don't need magnesium right now, or maybe you're getting too much iron. Like, it does make my job tricky, because we do sell supplements, and for some people, it just might not be the right time for them. It might not, maybe they don't need it at all. Maybe they can't absorb it because they have some gut issues going on, and they come to us and they say, okay, one, I don't feel anything, right? So like, that's usually not a terrible sign. If they feel bad, I say, okay, you need to stop taking the product and maybe evaluate and do a test later or whatever, right? But if you feel nothing, for certain products, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like adaptogens, for example, mushrooms, you're not really supposed to feel a high or an energy boost or anything like that. They're supposed to just help your body do more of what it does, right? It's supposed to help you adapt to stress. So like, I know a lot of people will take a mushroom and think, I don't feel wired, or I don't feel energy. And I just kind of explain, that's not what you're supposed to feel. It's something you want to take consistently to help support your health. And, generally you should maintain homeostasis and feel good and sleep well and whatever, and not just feel some like high because you took a health product, for example.
Right. No, I think that's really helpful. And I would love to hear from your perspective. I know you've talked about how the ancestral way of living is often the path of most or more resistance. Yep. And I've just noticed, even just recently, like in several spaces is coming up, how it's so weird how the reaction when we're trying to get healthy and make these positive changes for our lives is sometimes really like defensive. People are like upset that you're making these choices to better your life. Like, you're going gluten-free or whatever, or eliminating sugar, and you get so much gripe for it. Like, it's like, why is that? Like, what's going on there? And did you feel that when you were starting your brand?
Oh man. Wow. This is a big one. Let me first ask you a question. So were you getting these comments from like friends and family members?
Yeah. Some people thinking you're being too extreme, or you need to be more balanced, like this whole everything in moderation approach. Yeah. And I'm like, what is this? Yeah.
Yeah. So everything in moderation is why we have 50% obesity rate, and 2 million people a year in America die from preventable lifestyle diseases. So I call BS on all of that. Right.
Thank you.
Yes. So that's just the short way to put it. The second way, when you understand evolutionary psychology, right, which is a whole nother branch of, kind of a science that's been getting more attention lately as we learn more. Evolutionary biology is more the physical aspect. Evolutionary psychology is the behavior and why we think and do things, confirmation bias, heuristics, all these different things that in our modern world, I mean, just look at the virus stuff, any of that, you can see how so polarizing, how people on one side or the other, it becomes a tribalistic thing, which is built into our nature. Humans are tribalistic creatures that kept our ancestors safe, right? And so when people criticize you for doing something that is outside the status quo, right? Usually they like you in that neat little box you were in already, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a first order, right? The second order is you're now doing something that threatens their status quo.
Yeah.
Oh, well, why are they gluten free? It creates cognitive dissonance, which is that feeling in their head where somebody kind of does something that challenges your worldview. You don't like it. You don't want to change. You don't even want to see it or hear about it. So let me just like nitpick at people. Now, to answer the other question though, for me, that never happened to me because I just have that personality where I will just tell people like forcibly, like, this is what I'm doing, and I don't want to hear what you have to say about it, right? And so I've always tried to think about that, like being a type A entrepreneur or whatever. I've always been lucky that I've never really had naysayers in my life. I think more so they might do it behind my back, and I just learned to just not even care. You know, I don't really care about people's opinion, honestly, right? And so it has served me. But I do get it. If you like maybe grew up in an Italian family and you have a huge family and grandmas and aunts and uncles and everyone has kind of a say in what you do, whereas I've always had kind of a smaller family, so I didn't have the same social pressure, I can totally understand where people are coming from. So it's always something I'm trying to think about, like, how can I help people be independent minded, think for themselves, like be a leader, right? Be a leader in your family even, right? And just accept, you know, like, this is what I'm gonna do, right? And maybe have a conversation with people. I would appreciate it if you supported me. And if you don't want to support me, then I at least don't want to hear what you have to say about it. Sometimes you'd be surprised. A lot of people will respect that if you go to them with that and you just have kind of a one-on-one heart to heart. And some people will just say, yeah, okay, that's fine. And they'll still make their comments, right? So you have to figure out how you address that. But this is just, it's funny because this is an ancestrally appropriate example. Right? Our ancestors, let's just go down the rabbit hole real quick.
Yes.
So our ancestors evolved in small tribes. Most people understand that. 25, 35, 40, maybe 100 people at the high end. Right? And what that meant was the group had to think as a collective unit. This is what propelled Homo sapiens to the top of the food chain. Right? When we learned how to hunt collectively and share resources collectively, that's when we just completely dominated the rest of the animal kingdom. Nobody had a chance at that point. Right? So I'll give you an example, reciprocity. You do something for someone and you feel like that they should do it back for you. Or maybe you ask them for a favor and they don't, and you just really get that irky feeling. You know how that is? And even if you do something or somebody does something for you, you then feel like you have to do something for them. Sometimes that can kind of like make you feel weird. Like, I don't like asking people for a lot of things because like I feel like I'm obliged to them. Doesn't mean I don't want the help at times. So I just tend to do it myself. So I know that's something I need to work on, right? So that's built into our species because if you were to, let's say, go hunt, like say the men break for the day, they go hunting, 10 hunters go out, 2 hunters come back with kills, 8 come back unsuccessful. Okay. So it's funny here. This is actually, this is a good tangent. There's an observed process known as shaming the meat. Okay, this was observed in, I forget the study. It was probably like in the 60s, 40s, or 30s. It was a modern day anthropologist that was working with hunter-gatherers in Africa, never touched by technology or anything. And he was able to communicate with them. And so he explained this shaming the meat process. If a hunter comes back with, like, let's say a big chunk of meat on his shoulder, right? He's supposed to come in and basically make fun of his kill to the tribe. He's supposed to be, oh, I'm sorry, guys. This is the best I could do. This is my pathetic chunk of meat, whatever. He was supposed to shame it aggressively, right? And then the rest of the tribe would hop in and make fun of him and be like, you know, you're a lousy hunter or whatever. Like, in all these psychological kind of games were meant so that he didn't get a big ego, okay? Mm-hmm. So a big ego in a tribal setting would be hoarding resources, maybe hoarding mates, maybe doing things that would threaten the status of the group, maybe threatening the safety of the group, right? You could not have an ego. And I remember that the rough translation of, you know, they were talking to the anthropologist and saying like, why we do this? And they're basically like, we can't have big men here. So we have to always make sure that everybody brings down, no egos, whatever, because that is a threat to the group survival, right? So if you think about that, anytime anybody does anything that might be perceived as, you know, elitist or like outside the box, what do people do? It's that phrase of like the frog and like trying to jump out, or the rat trying to jump out and the rest of the rats are trying to pull you back in. Like, people try to bring you back down to the same level. And a lot of times they don't even realize they're doing this. This is just psychology, human psychology, right? And it's to keep people as equal as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I thank you for diving into that. I think that's a great picture of, what's happening now. So when you actually started your business, now you said because of your personality, people weren't necessarily coming to you and like, why are you doing this? That's a bad idea or whatever.
I've literally never had that in my life. It's just strange.
So
I think I'm always excited and aggressive. Yeah. I'm just like, guys, I'm so excited. This is amazing. And I think maybe they don't want to rain on my parade, or maybe they're just afraid to get into it with me. Cause I'm not the type that, like, if you say something to me, I have a retort 100% of the time. It's probably why I always struggle with my teachers in school, and I was always the problem student, right? Because I always have a retort, and I think people can't really handle that. And so I don't know what the strategy is for people. You kind of have to figure out your own way. Some people might be good with just like cracking jokes. Some people might be good with just ignoring it and moving on, pretending no one said something. You have to find out what your flavor is. But one thing's for sure, if you live your life based on what people around you say is best for you, you will suffer. It's a constant. You will suffer. In fact, one of the top regrets of the dying, there was a study done, even a book done, and you can find this article if you just search top 5 regrets of the dying.
Okay.
This person, I think she was a researcher. She went to a bunch of nursing homes and she said, okay, what are your top 5 regrets? And she went to a bunch of them, got a bunch of data. One of the top 5 regrets was, I wish I would have lived for myself instead of other people. Now imagine you're on your deathbed. I try to visualize it. I'm 75, 80. I don't know. Maybe I got diagnosed with cancer or something. And all I can think about is that I just didn't do the things I wanted to do. And I did all these things I didn't want to do. Maybe it was go to the wrong profession, the wrong school, the wrong this, whatever, to please all these people. And then I did it. And then those people that I was supposed to be doing it for didn't really care or moved on and they were on to something else. Like, I've wasted my life, you know? And that is, I mean, think about that. You can't go back. You know, you can't go back. So that should be very scary for people. I always think about death and negative visualization, the Stoics, to try to really make sure that I'm taking advantage of life, right? Because, you know, losing my father at a young age and my whole dad's side of the family, actually, when I was, you know, 18, 19, 20, it just made me kind of like respect the fickleness of life. It really is. We could all be gone and poof in a second.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I wonder then too, like, okay, if the people that are currently around you, you're making these life changes, are not supportive or kind of just pulling you down or wanting to pull you back like into the pit, like, how important do you think it is to actually then go find people that do live that way? Like, what would you say to that? Like, whether that's like CrossFit, I know there's a huge paleo kind of community. If that's something, you know, really get engaged in that community, if your family doesn't support it or whatever, like, what role does that play, do you see?
It's a huge role. I mean, you got to find the people, you got to find your tribe. You got to learn from people. You have to find mentors. But for me, I mean, there's a couple of things here. So you tell somebody to find a tribe and they get all these ideas about like needing to have this perfect group and have all these things. I mean, you could just have one person that you like chit chat with about your fitness goals. You have like one accountability partner. You have one workout partner. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. The internet is amazing because it's been able to bring these groups together. You can find anybody, Facebook groups, forums, you know, Zoom groups now, in-person groups, meetups. Like, you can find anybody that shares interest with you. And I recommend you should. Okay. Now for me, I'll give you kind of an idea of how I did it. Cause I've always been more of the kind of leader, just really a simple way of putting it. I've always been more of a leader, right? So I don't always go searching out for that, but in my entrepreneurship career, it's so easy for me to be humble when I can learn from other people that are just further along the path of me. So I've been I was at a dinner at one point where the net worth of the whole room was like $1 billion. And I'm just like a fly in the wall. And I'm just like, I'm here to learn from you guys. This is amazing. I'm here to having a good time. And it's like, you know, and I think a lot of times that mentor-mentee relationship, sometimes people can be kind of, you know, clingy. And I'm just like, I'm going to add value where I can, because I know that I could teach you guys about evolutionary psychology, for example. And so like, I'll do that. And then I'm gonna learn about you on business, marketing, everything else, you know? So there's a lot of examples of how you can have these kind of mentor-mentee roles, and you can find groups and you can find accountability partners or whatever. But a final note on that is read biographies and read books and watch YouTube videos, because you can be mentored by people and never meet them. So this illusion that they have to like talk to you, give you this wise sage advice in person, it's like, maybe you should first read all their books and watch all their YouTube videos before you even worry about that, because like you're going to learn almost everything they know by doing that. And so like biographies for me and audiobooks have always been a big thing. And I've just always been kind of a self-learner when I'm interested in it. And so that, you know, that either one, probably both, would be a good thing.
Yeah, which I think just speaks to as well, like you have to approach this way of living with intention and like, okay, if I don't have people in my life currently, what can I do then to find that? I mean, you have to take initiative and take ownership of that. Like, do I need to read some books? Do I need to, you know, go find a group in my area or online or whatever? And instead of just kind of sitting like, well, no one supports me, you know, sort of thing. Like,
well, yeah. And to that point, something I didn't mention, you do need to you do need to potentially cull the time you spend with certain people in your life, if they are a big enough influence. Okay. So you know how it is. Like you have a group of friends and you all hang out and you smoke pot and eat crap and you go drinking every Friday night. Like, there's a whole spectrum of these people and the different things you might do with them, right? Maybe it's just the weekends with this group. Maybe it's your family every day sitting in front of TV eating Lucky Charms, right? If you're in that environment, and the more you're in that environment, the more you need to mitigate that environment. So like if you're at home all day and there's just crap in there, maybe you should consider moving out. If your health matters that much, maybe you should consider getting your own place, or go be out of the house all day, right? Spend time outside, spend time in your room. Environment is huge. When we're around other people, especially when they're eating, I mean, that is just like such a psychological cue to our biology. Like we should be doing the same thing. Like it's our group, it's our tribe, it's the food's there. Like, scarcity. Oh my gosh. Like our biology doesn't understand that the environment today is full of food because what we evolved in, food was scarce, right? And so certain people in your life, if they're holding you back, whether it's financially, professionally, mentally, emotionally, or physically, that is probably the number one thing that you have to get right? Especially if you're the type that's not really like a leader that's going to go out and be like, guys, I'm eating like this way and I don't want to hear anything about it. And I want you to follow me. Like if that's not your style, then you're going to have to make some changes. And it's probably the hardest thing for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, I mean, just the whole concept too of the social aspect of meal times and like, what if you do better eating 2 meals a day, but your family eats 3, and it's like, well, I mean, like that whole weird, you're right, psychological thing that goes on of like, is this wrong then to not eat 3 square meals with my family? Or like, I mean, there's a lot to it, but I think it does go back to like, I don't know, listening to your body and realizing, like you said, our body, like our biology wasn't adapted to this environment where food was in abundance everywhere all the time. Like,
yep. It's
so
a huge mismatch.
There's a big mismatch, and I think we feel that, but don't really realize it sometimes either. So,
well, that's what the entire Ancestral Mind's about, is about understanding what are these things, screens, blue light, being inside AC all day, not getting sunlight, not moving, staring at small print on a screen, like all these things are mismatches. And there's a lot of things that profit the more you do these behaviors. I mean, big tech, the entire freaking stock market is like 4 or 5 companies that are built on getting you addicted to their products and services. Yeah. It's like big pharma, billions of dollars to get you addicted to their maintenance drugs. They're not in the business of curing people. Even sick care is not in the business of curing people. The medical establishment, most of them know nothing about nutrition, know nothing about preventative, right? They're in the business of patching you up, maybe giving you a pill, and then saying, oh, well, that's just the way it's going to be from now on. And like, no, that's not how it has to be. And that's why, like, I call them accidental conspiracies, because it's not like doctors wake up and they're like, oh, I want to contribute to this massive conspiracy and I'm going to like keep all these people sick and addicted. I'm going to make a bunch of money. Nobody does that. I mean, maybe a couple guys do that, but like very few take their Hippocratic oath and do that. They get sucked into a system that's propped up by pharmaceuticals and billions of dollars, and people that aren't willing to hear things they don't want to hear. They don't want to exercise or eat right or do any of these things. They want to eat out of a package, and they want a pill, and they just want to sit in front of the TV watching whatever, and it's unfortunate. And like, but we got to do something, because these trends are getting worse. And 1 in 3 kids are now obese. Like, what? Yeah. My son's generation is going to grow up. He's going to be an outlier because he's going to be fit and strong, and he's going to eat clean. Like literally, he asks for liver. He's 2 years old. Oh, I love that. We feed him fish roe. He's like, more roe, more roe, more roe. He's like, more yogurt, more yogurt. And we put like liver specks on the yogurt. Like, no, it's just, the kids thing is a big one. That drives me nuts, because, the idea that we can just feed kids sugar because they have fast metabolisms, you're literally poisoning them. I'm sorry, parents out there, if you're listening to this, if you're feeding your kids sugar on a daily basis, you're poisoning them. It's just what it is. Yeah. I was recently watching the Fat documentary, and the story of the couple who had a son with seizures, and they put him on the ketogenic diet, and people, I think it was even the doctor who was like, that's almost child abuse. Like, you need to see a psychologist. I'm like, what? I mean, it's like people have such these dramatic reactions. It's like, it just makes sense. There's like so much research on that the ketogenic diet helps with seizures. Like, so yeah, it's my doctors. Let's go to that tangent real quick. So the doctors, if a doctor doesn't understand it, if they weren't taught it, they write you off. You're a hypochondriac, or it's all in your head, or whatever, right? We had Michaela Peterson on, Jordan Peterson's daughter. She had massive health issues her whole life. She had, arthritis when she was like 12. She couldn't walk, all these things. And none of the doctors could do anything for her, because she had autoimmune issue, an underlying autoimmune. And autoimmune is one of those things that's very diet related, and doctors have no idea. They can't diagnose it. They can't test for it, etc. So they just wrote her off for years. Finally, she figured out she had to basically eat like steak and salt or meat and salt. And then because even a little bit of plant foods was just making her flare up. She did that, and now she has basically eliminated all of her symptoms. I've had 2 other guests on the show, Emily, and then another guest she wrote the book with Joel Salatin, Sina. Same thing, autoimmune issue, struggle with their whole life with doctors in and out. Doctors basically eventually wrote them off, said, I can't help you, or it must be in your head, go see a psychologist. And then they took their health into their own hands. They diagnosed their diet, and then obviously lifestyle and exercise and all those other things that are pretty obvious. But it's the diet thing that's always so confusing because there's so much bad information out there. Like fat is bad, or grains are good, or the food pyramid. People have no idea how deep the conspiracy goes with that kind of crap. Like it's literally unbelievable.
Yeah.
And even more research is coming out on a daily basis showing that saturated fat's good for you. Meat's good for you. Like even dairy now is good for you. Like all these things that were demonized for years, we're finally getting some research coming out, but we're talking about billion-dollar, like I said, accidental conspiracies propped up by the profit motive, propped up by the fact that people want a quick fix. They don't want to do the work. And I mean, it might be 20, 30 years before like the actual food guidelines from the government, right, gets passed down, and then the doctors pick it up and the pharmaceuticals have to adapt. Right. But that's going to happen probably only after the incumbents today either retire or die off. Right. And so to close this thought out, there is a concept known as Planck's principle. So it basically is summarized as scientific evolution happens when the current generation of scientists die. It's kind of morbid, but, right. and he identified this, and I'm thinking like back in the day, it might've been the 1800s. I don't remember when it was. Don't quote me on that, but because he was looking at like why and how does scientific evolution happen? And what he found is like, you're a scientist, you've been doing science for years, you've been writing papers on it, you believe what you believe, and you only like the theories are only going to evolve when you retire or die, right? Because then the new generation of scientists come in, they're open-minded and like, well, what are all these other things going on? What are these fringe things? Those fringe things get ignored by the incumbents because they're just, maintain their status quo or their job or their position. They don't want to ruffle the feathers. If you look at what's going on with COVID and all the different things, the doctors and epidemiologists, you see a lot of this going on. And this is, again, evolutionary psychology. Why is this? There's another quote. Upton Sinclair said, never expect a man to understand something when his salary depends on not understanding it. Right?
So powerful.
Wow. Think about that. That pretty much sums up politics for you in science and even current science and medical at this point.
Yeah.
Right? So just makes me sick.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I am with you on all of that. So kind of diving deeper into like the practical stuff, you've developed this first principles of human health and the areas that you find are most critical to focus on. So I think that'd be a great thing. Just if someone wants to know where to start, like these are some really helpful areas. Do you mind letting us know like how you came up with that and a little
I'll
bit
open the PDF right now. Yep.
Right.
Okay. So, I had the CrossFit gym back in Florida. I was getting into paleo and evolutionary psychology and biology a little bit. And then I just kind of like, since then it's been a never ending study. And I kept finding myself recommending the same things over and over, right? Because at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, there's only a few things that you need to do. Most of them are free, right? So let's just go and order this. And you can actually find this PDF over at colin.coach. At the top, it says Ancestral Mind. That's where you find the PDF and the podcast and everything like that.
I will link it for them.
Okay, great. So the first one is obviously real food. I mean, it's just simply amazing how much the food you eat plays a role in your health.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And I just can't harp on it enough. Something I've been thinking about lately, because I'm thinking about if I were to bring this message to 50 million Americans, for example, I'd have to kind of, I hate to say it, dumb it down a little bit, right? I'd have to make it accessible, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought about a simple, easy way to explain this. And maybe your audience or somebody listening could maybe try this for themselves. You can eat anything you want if you buy the raw ingredients and cook it at home, right? So I know at Diet Wars, you get into like no grains, this, that, no sugar, this, eat meat only now, not this, only plants. But it's a lot of debating about what's optimal for like the different foods and macronutrients, right? But not really anybody's talking about the fact that you need to prepare your own meals. If you let corporations cook and prepare your foods for you, right? If you eat out of a package, you're always paying a cost. Okay. So if all people did, like if you want to eat bread, make a loaf, right? We have this einkorn wheat. It's an ancient wheat because US wheat sucks. So we get this einkorn wheat and we've made like different recipes and I never feel bloated afterwards. Like it's incredible how much of even things like gluten are so exacerbated by just the processing and the fake wheat and the GMOs and all the crap that goes on in the food industry, right? When you remove all that and you go and prep things, cook things at home, it's like, again, you could pretty much have anything you want. You want cookies? You want ice cream? Make it at home. Like I've made ice cream, vanilla ice cream from raw dairy. I got from a farm in Pennsylvania. They ship it in, egg yolks, raw dairy, and heavy cream and milk. And you just whip that up in the thing. And like, it's amazing, you know?
Yeah.
And so obviously there's some exceptions here. Like I still eat like Rebel ice cream from time to time. And there's like certain products I might buy here and there, but if anybody is struggling with like what they should do about their nutrition or diet, or is confusing, just cook. If you just get in the kitchen and cook, right? That will solve like 95% of your problems.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the first one. Is there any questions on that before I go to the next one?
I was just going to ask, did you learn how to cook at a young age? I mean, was that intuitive to you, or was that something you had to like, I have to figure this out so I can optimize my health?
Yeah, it was. My sister and I grew up eating the standard American diet for the most part. We would have like dinner, and it might be like mac and cheese. It might be spaghetti. It might be meatloaf sometimes. It was just kind of the very standard things. And again, I mean, we're talking like early 90s. Nobody knew about any of this stuff. So it's not like I blame my mom or anything. And right. I know Cinnamon Toast Crunch, big bowls of cereal, like Frosted Flakes, like we did it all, right? When I got older, like we said, I was doing CrossFit. I was in the gym. I was trying to get lean. And then I was like getting into fitness, and I was like reading Men's Health and all the crap they say. And like, you know, I was doing chicken breasts and rice. That's like the common prescription, right?
And a little bit of broccoli. Yeah.
Yeah. You get your greens through broccoli. Like, and it's just like, and so, I mean, it's just funny looking back on that, and I see how just absurd that is. But that's what kind of kicked off the cooking, is like, well, just cooking chicken well is for most people really hard to do. Like, so I had to figure out how to pan fry it and different things. And fortunately the internet was there, and YouTube and cooking videos. And I just really went heavy into cooking, bought all the pans, did all these things. And yeah, I developed a passion for cooking. Now today, even, you know, only 8 to 9 years after that, like the technology that's available is just insane. Like you can get an air fryer, you can get the Instapot, you know, and they had slow cookers back then. I probably didn't use it as much, but you can make cooking stupid simple. So this is not, I mean, even the oven, I never appreciated. You can throw a bunch of stuff on a sheet pan, put it on 350, and then just cover it in salt, maybe a little bit of oil, and then just check back every 15 minutes. And when there's color on it, it's probably done. And you eat it in like, literally, you have a whole meal. It's a sheet pan meal, right? Yeah. So there's just no reason that you can't cook. You just have to find easy ways, get a few tools, get one sharp knife, you know, get one good cast iron, get one sheet pan and rack. And that's literally all most people need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you need to cook, or at least have somebody in the house that's willing to cook for you.
Yes. And it is something as people can learn, even if they're starting at zero, because of like what we have access to now as well.
Well, you can do it fast too. The idea that it has to be this huge thing. I mean, in fact, every day I break my fast. It's usually like 3 to 4 p.m. I take one cast iron pan. It's an 8-inch. I take one steak. It's usually a ribeye or a strip. And I season that down on both sides, pat it dry. My pan's preheating. I put the steak in the pan. After 2 minutes exactly, I flip it. After 2 minutes after that, usually because they're thinner steaks, it's done. I let it rest for 5 minutes. I've now used one knife, one pan. My whole meal is basically the steak. I might have something on the side, but it's just like in the fridge. Yeah. One ingredient, two, salt, right? Salt in the steak. And then cleanup is simple, because the cast iron pan, while it's hot, you rinse it with water and then you dry it out. That's done. The sheet pan, I rinse real quick. The knife, I rinse real quick. And that meal is basically 10 to 12 minutes, right? 10 to 12 minutes. And I've taken my entire meal. Even the sourcing end was simple, because it's just a steak, you know, and it's like, that's just one example. And then usually at night we do a little bit more elaborate of a meal, or maybe my mom like slow cook something, or maybe we put, like last night we had chicken in the air fryer. You just literally throw it in, you set the freaking button, and then you come back and it's done. Like, it's just, there's so many ways to make good food today that it's just not an excuse. And it's very enjoyable when you learn how to cook too. It's very empowering.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, we can go to the next one. Thank you.
Well, these will be shorter, because that's the biggest one. So that's number one.
Yes.
So the second principle is sleep. So sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. Most people know why sleep is important, so I won't really get into that. I'm just going to give you some of my tips for sleep. So pitch black room. So get some blackout curtains. You know, don't leave any devices turned on where you have the blue lights nagging or anything like that. There's also EMF issues with that. So I turn everything off at night. I use 2 sound machines. There's a Marpack sound machine, which you can get on Amazon, and then I have a cheaper one that's digital. They're a lifesaver. And if you travel ever, I bring 2 every time I travel. Amazing. It's completely changed my like travel sleep game. Let's see, avoid screen use 1 to 2 hours before bed. This is why I like a Kindle, and I like to do kind of low light. You can even do candles. Use the F.Lux app on a Mac. I think they have it on Windows too, but it basically removes orange or blue light from your screen. And I basically have it set at all times. Like for right now, I have it set so that it's like 3100K. And so if I take it down to like 2900, it's a little bit more orange. And what that does is as the night goes on, it reduces the blue light. It does change the color a little bit of the screen, but I've done it so much that I don't even notice it. And that removes blue light, which is a huge disruptor to your melatonin and other levels. And it signals your body that the sun is out, right? Light really messes up through your eyes, your body, your biology, and it makes it harder to fall asleep. It, like I said, stymies melatonin production, etc. So blue light's a big one. If all you did was go into night shift on your phone, F.Lux app on your computer, and then maybe lower light at night. I have red bulbs in my bathroom, so they're straight red, like red light district style bulbs, and I got rid of all the regular bulbs so that at night when I wake up, if I have to go to the bathroom, it doesn't wake me up. Right? Mm-hmm. That's another thing. People just have like lights on, in the house everywhere, and they're just walking around and there's lights everywhere. That is a disruptor. It's telling your biology that the sun's out and you should be like out and hunting or doing whatever. Right. So you need to, just like when the sun goes down, right? It gets darker, gradually. You need to do the same thing for your sleep. It's such an easy hack too. Like once you just start doing it, it's done. And so that's pretty much everything for sleep.
Yeah. And going back to the whole, like our ancestors, like life stopped once it got dark, you were done. I mean, it's like,
you were done.
You had no other options. And so it's like, but now we can like hack that and stay up late and work late. And it's not for our better though. It's not for our benefit.
It's definitely not. Yep. Circadian rhythm and all that. Yeah. So that's principle 2, sleep. Principle 3 is movement. Okay. Now I didn't want to put like exercise here because like for most people, they need to just move more. And then yes, you should be exercising a couple times a week. Yes, you should be resistance training a couple times a week. If you want to live a long time, if you want strong bones, you have to do these things. And so it's like, I keep dumbbells in my room so I can just do them here and there. I have a gym outside, fortunately. It's just like anything you can do to, like you said, the path of most resistance. So if you're parking in a parking lot, go to the end. Mm-hmm. When I get off a plane, everybody's on the escalator and they'll wait in line. And I'm like, there's stairs right there. What the hell are you guys doing? Right. Yeah. So take the stairs, and when you build that kind of that ethos in your mind of like more movement, not less, more resistance, not less. Right. Because what do you do when you go to the gym? You're trying to get the maximal amount of resistance into your biology so that it gets stronger for the next time. Right. So with movement, the more I move, the more calories I burn, the more I stimulate my cardiovascular health, the more my gut, walking is actually really good for gut and digestion and all these different things, right? The more I do that, the better I am in literally every single way. Our ancestors used to walk 13 to 15 miles a day, all right? Most people walk under a mile a day. And if you actually look at a place like New York, a lot of people are thin in New York, right? That's not a coincidence. A lot of them walk everywhere.
Yeah.
Walking is probably the most underrated thing. So what I've been doing is I've been doing a 30-minute walk every single day I take my AirPods and I listen to an audiobook. So I get 30 minutes of reading in, and then I get a 30-minute walk. I also walk without my shirt off in the sun. I get my vitamin D. I'm getting 3 of the most important things for my health knocked out in one literally 30-minute session a day. Yeah. Like this stuff is so simple. It's free. It's accessible. You can do it anywhere. You can go out in your yard and walk around. You could garden, walk, I pull my son in the little cart thing sometimes. And like, he just sits there like, oh, people just they have to build it into their life, because your health is going to suffer. People are dying earlier deaths than they should because they're just not doing these simple things.
So, and I'm just curious on the movement. I do see movement and exercise sort of is different too, because I think people overtrain a lot to try to meet their weight loss goals. But then when they're not at the gym overtraining, they're on the couch, in front of the TV or whatever all day or whatnot. So how do you see those two as different? And like, I know like overtraining is a thing, but we tend to not move enough as well. So how are both existing in the same space?
Yeah. I need to think of a good analogy for this one. I've heard a lot of quotes on this. If you look into someone like Colin Stuckert's work, like there's a lot of quotes. I'm just going to botch it, but it's basically like 1 hour in the gym a day. And then, 15 hours was like sitting and doing nothing I think they've made connections to be like, it's like the same as smoking or it's as bad for you smoking or whatever. Yeah. Like you can't just go to the gym for an hour and then lounge around the rest of the day. It's not ancestrally appropriate. Like think about a shark. Sharks, if they stop moving, they die. Most people don't realize this because
Whoa.
they have to move through the water to get the water through the gills so that they can breathe. So if they're always swimming, literally always swimming, right? Humans, because our ancestors moved daily, right? We had bouts where we would relax and sit around maybe a fire and lounge, whatever, but we were out walking. We were maybe digging up roots. We were hunting. We were, foraging for berries. What do you think foraging is? You go to a berry bush and then you pick it off and then you go to another one. You're just doing that for literally hours on end. And like I said, 15 miles a day. Like if you had a camp, even 15 miles a day is pretty good amount of space to cover, like in a square area. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so our ancestors moved. I mean, we could probably say something like 4 to 8 hours a day, probably like constant movement or something like that. Like, I don't know if we have those numbers. I'd actually have to look and see if there's any research.
Yeah.
We did do a lot of sitting, a lot of squatting on the ground and things like that. We weren't sitting in chairs, right? Of course. So that's different. We weren't laying in beds, right? So there were different positions, but it was also very intermittent. So it was like, you might move for a little bit, you might rest and sit for a little bit. You might move for a little bit, you might rest and sit for a little bit, And so movement was just built into our species. Like, look at any animal in nature. It's usually moving. It's not just like sitting there or standing there, staring at a tree. Like, what do you even do if you sit there, right? That would actually been, for a lot of species, an evolutionary disadvantage. If you're just sitting there, you're just waiting for prey to hop on you when you're not looking. So movement is kind of built into a lot of animals as a way to, defend yourself, basically.
Yeah. And I've noticed for myself as I've adopted like this kind of principle of, I think Ben Greenfield talks about movement snacks and stuff. I feel like I get to the point where after I've sit, like, I feel like this craving to like go out and move. Like, I can't, on a day where I have to sit longer, I'm traveling or whatever. It just like, I don't know, something inside me just feels like, oh, I have to get out and move. It's like, I noticed, like, my body like craves it now. Cause I think it's like the way we were made. So
yeah. And short breaks of movement is huge.
Yeah.
Right. It always feels like you're not doing anything, but I mean, just going down, laying on the ground, stretching for a little bit, doing some push-ups, sit-ups, walking outside, coming back. Like, you just don't want to be in a static position without moving. Like for example, sitting in a chair like this, hunched over, or lounging on a couch like this, or laying in a bed, or whatever. You don't want to do that for long periods of time. Most people don't realize astronauts, they have to exercise I think like 4 hours a day or something, because otherwise their muscles just atrophy. They just waste away. Right? Without gravity, your muscles aren't stressed. They literally waste away. Your biology is saying, oh, what's this new environment? I don't need these muscles. These muscles are metabolically expensive, so I'm just going to get rid of them. And it just wastes them away, right? So,
I've never heard of that. That's
move people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's 5.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's 4.
That ties
5
into the next one. Yeah.
5 is intermittent fasting. Okay. So this is an interesting one because most people would think, oh, intermittent fasting, that's not a first principle of biology. That's a weight loss hack. That's a gimmick. But here's the thing. Our ancestors did not have fridges or grocery stores, okay, or fast food. They could only eat when they got access to food, which wasn't all the time, right? And it wasn't consistent. One day you might have a hunt, you'd be good. One day, nobody would come back with meat. Maybe snack on some berries or twigs or leaves or whatever, right? So not only would the frequency of food you eat vary, but the amounts and the types of food. And this is actually an interesting one that I'm expanding on that I've been thinking about a lot with intermittent fasting. So I did a video recently, basically the 3 types of intermittent fasting. And so for me, I'm experimenting with some days I do only animal products, right? Nothing else, literally just like pure carnivore diet. Other days I might do, and I haven't done this fully, but like I might do just fruit and maybe like some I don't do a lot of greens right now. Maybe like some dairy, right? So no meat. And then other days you do no food. And then maybe some days I do just fruit for a little bit. And I try to like do mostly 24-hour fast where I just have like a little bit of food. And then I do a 24-hour fast. Anytime you can mix up the variability, you're keeping your body guessing, right? You're becoming anti-fragile, as Nassim Taleb would say, because you're stressing the organism, right? Consistency makes you fragile, right? So the more consistent you are with certain things, makes you fragile. Why? Because the wild is not a consistent static place. It's literally forever changing. The universe, the only constant in the universe is change. Nothing is static. Literally nothing. Everything wastes away, except maybe gold or silver. They kind of hang around for a while. Which is why I'm buying a lot of those.
Yes. Yeah. No, I love that too, because I think that's the other thing too, is it's like, once you find a diet protocol that works for you for a little while, like, I think you will reach kind of the max of that for like, I know for a while I did vegan and that destroyed my gut, but It's like, at first you feel better and it like maybe helped you get through some other things, but like to stay there, you're actually crippling yourself to not vary it. And I think that can be kind of scary for people too, because they find this new way of eating that like heals them, but then after a little while, it doesn't quite have the same effect if that's all they ever do with no change or variance.
Yeah. Yeah. And just even varying what you're like the diet itself, but varying quantities, frequencies, meal timing, you know, like, yeah, there's a lot there, but anytime you can mix things up, generally it's usually better for you.
Yeah. And then I would also notice, like with the intermittent fasting, like the food, the like sense of food freedom, that food is not, I mean, for the first time ever, once I started implementing like the 16-8, I went from being hungry all the time, like had to eat every 2 hours because I felt just ravenous, to I'm barely hungry for the 2 meals a day I eat
Such
now.
a great feeling.
And it's like, it is actually, it's like, I feel like I can accomplish so much more with my life, which is really surprising. You would think, you know, having a smaller eating window, like, oh, I'm going to be so hungry if I fast 16 hours. It's like,
well, yeah.
true.
Let's explain that evolution real quick. So
Yeah.
imagine there's actually a tribe in Africa. Modern day anthropologists were studying them, and the percentage with, I think it was the Hadza, I'm not sure. They were only successful hunting about 10% of the time. Okay. Now that's not universal because there's Plains buffalo Indians. They could have gone out every day and had a huge buffalo to eat. Right. So like there's a lot of variance here, you know, and this is also maybe post like mastodon era where those big megafauna died off. Okay. So there's a lot of different variables. There used to be giant anteaters and giant sloths. And a lot of these were, you know, it was a combination of climate change plus humans hunting them to extinction, basically. You know, our ancestors they had no concept of like, you know, what is it? Like sustainability, you know, they were just like food, get it. Right. Yeah. You know, food, eat, you know,
with survival. Yeah.
Right. So what was the point there? We were talking about, I totally lost my train of thought.
Was it?
10%.
Yeah.
It was a 10. So yeah. So this tribe had a 10% hunting rate. So let's say it went out 10 days in a row. They got to kill maybe one day. Okay. Now imagine that. Imagine every day you go to the fridge and there's only food in there one of 10 days. Okay. Yeah. So if you, I totally forgot the thought. What was the, we were talking about variability. What did you just say to prompt that? I forget what you just said.
Yeah, did it have to do with the hunger too? How?
The hunger. So fasting and sharpness, mental acuity. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Okay. So imagine, you know, you are 5 days in, you know, 10% success rate. You're 5 days in. You're really hoping to get a kill day because you're pretty hungry. Okay. You have to be extra sharp. So think about this from an evolutionary perspective. The longer you go without food, the more mentally sharp you need to be, because that will increase your success of a kill or stumbling on a beehive or stumbling on some roots in the ground. Like you'd have to be really mentally acute. This idea that I'm so hungry, I can't do anything, right? Like that is a modern invention. You know, that would have killed our species. If we got hungry and then we were like, you know, cranky running around, we've just been lunch for some predator that we weren't paying attention to. Right. Yeah. So as food became more scarce, we had to become more on our game to find food.
Yeah.
Right. So I did a 2-day fast about 3 months ago. It was one of the best. Like I've never felt that great in my life. Like literally incredible. And I need to build those more into my routine. And that's actually something I've been thinking about. It's like, we're so programmed to eat daily. There's days where I'm not even hungry and I'm just like, oh, well, it's the average time I eat. I'm just going to go eat. And I'm like, I wasn't really hungry. I feel kind of full now. I feel like I even overate, even though I didn't eat that much. Those are days that you should just literally go as long as you can without eating.
Yeah. Cause that's what your body's telling you. I mean,
yes.
Yeah,
yep.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. You have so much, I can tell you're really well read. You have so much insight. It's like all these like things that things I've never heard even. So I love it.
I dropped out of college. So I had to become a self-learner, and I'm telling you, books, man, if you want to be successful today, read books, audiobooks, you know, Kindle books. I was reading 100 books a year for the past like 5 years. I've turned that down a little bit, but it's actually not that hard. If you're listening to audiobook every time you're driving somewhere or walking, most people could read 50 books in a year and not even like blink an eye pretty much.
Yeah. Oh, so, I love that.
So important. So social, that's number 6. So we talked about tribes, social creatures. Humans absolutely need social connection. And there's actually a very telling, sad story that I heard recently. So there was a guidance counselor in Canada. Okay. In Canada, they have this really dumb law, as most governments do, of forced retirement. So at a certain age, he had to retire. I guess the theory is let somebody else come in to get a job. It's just complete and utter stupidity. So this guidance counselor loved his job. All the students loved him, coworkers, everything, right? It was probably pretty much his purpose in life.
Yeah.
He was forced into retirement. And then my understanding, and I'm fuzzy on that, but my understanding was in perfect health when he was a guidance counselor. 6 months later, after he was forced in retirement, he was dead.
Oh my goodness.
That is how important community is to humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And if you look at the psychological issues in our society today, where we take our phone and we think we're connecting with people, but we're really not. It's an illusion. It's fake connection. Suicides are on the rise in all age groups, especially young teens, teenagers, right? Which social media contributes to a lot of, because of things like bullying, comparison effect, and all this other crap that is a complete mismatch to our species. I mean, look at all the problems that have happened since we've been addicted to technology that didn't exist 15 years ago. I grew up without smartphones. Like, they had a Razor. That was like the most advanced phone. I was a senior in high school, right? And it's like kids are literally getting phones, begging their parents for phones when they're like 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm just like, and most parents give in, right? Because, whatever.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Unbelievable, right? So this is a huge mismatch. Now, the social aspect is, you also see this a lot of. There's a lot of FOMO and grass is greener in our culture. So it's like, you have, friends you hang out with. You have friends that are like less willing to say yes to something because they always think something cooler is going to happen. Or you have people that are flaky, or you have people that something cooler comes up and they just straight up cancel, or they flake, or they don't even it's technology in our hyper-connected world, and all these different things have made it so people are actually spending less time together. When they are spending time together, they're looking at their phone half the freaking time, right? They can't even maintain eye contact. They can't even maintain a conversation. They don't know how to listen. They're just literally waiting to get their word in or whatever.
Yeah.
It is very scary, because I'm a long-term thinker as an entrepreneur. I always have been. And so I'm always thinking, like, what's going to happen in 40, 50, 60 years? I used to think the internet was the greatest boon for mankind. I used to think it would bring, riches to everybody and opportunity to everybody. And I think it will eventually. But actually in 2020, I think it's the greatest existential threat to our species, not only from the personal health level, right? Because of the things we just talked about, but also from a political and macroeconomic and global level. Like, if you look at the speed of information and sharing, and even things like the COVID and how we're literally shutting the world down with, incomplete data and just all the nonsense around all of it. It's like, what happens when this happens every year? There's a new coronavirus that comes out. Or what happens when there's a new huge boogaboo that we're all supposed to be afraid of that comes out? Like, there's always some enemy or thing to be afraid of that the elite use to control the masses and get them voting a certain way, doing a certain thing, and living in fear. And fear itself is not good for humans at all, right? To live in that in a constant state, it just adds to the stress. Good book about that is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's, the idea that a lot of the modern day stressors that we have, a lot of the disease are actually also a byproduct of stress, right? So all the things I'm listing here, I don't really tackle stress specifically. It maybe should be in there, maybe like meditation, mindfulness, and it's just too big of a topic where I can't there'd be hundreds of recommendations, but what most people need more of is a detachment from technology. They need to get outside. They need to spend time with their friends and family. They need to turn their damn phones off. They need to put in airplane mode. In fact, I keep my phone in airplane mode most of the day. And I love it. Wow. And when people aren't calling me or texting me, I love it, because I'm at peace, and it's like, it takes time, and people get used to it, whatever. And it might be hard at first, whatever, but we need that. We need to take the modern stressors and we need to mitigate them by taking ownership of our life and managing what we're doing with these things. I use an iPhone. I use this huge iMac screen here, and I use all these things, and I use AC and running water, but I use them ideally, not always perfectly, in a way that is balanced and that doesn't cause negative side effects, right? It's usually, so Aristotle called it the golden mean. The idea of you have positive and negative. What's best is usually in the middle. If you look at politics, it's actually truth. That's why nothing happens, because the left and the right, all they want to do is argue about their side, when the truth is somewhere in the middle that nobody's willing to go to, right? Yeah. So, and that's why independents never win, because our two-party system, whatever. So it's the same thing with health. If you drink too much water, you die. If you don't drink any water, you die. If you eat too much food, you die. People are dying every day because of too much food. If you don't eat any food, you die. Okay. If you train a little bit too much, you'll have negative effects. If you train a lot, you can kill yourself. If you don't train at all, well, there's negative side effects to that as well. Like, if you don't move at all, you'll waste away. If you lay in the bed, right? Or if you're an astronaut and you don't move, you'll die. Your muscles will literally waste away and your heart will stop pumping, right? So the golden mean is to find what are these different extremes based on the environment I'm in, and mitigating those to the best of your ability. And that's why the 7 principles kind of help you do that. Because it's like, okay, did you get invited to go for coffee, but it's kind of a long drive, and you'd want to stay home, whatever. No, just go. Like, you are going to be so energized by that social connection you're going to get. It's going to make you feel better. And it's going to also have downstream effects for your mental health and sanity and everything. It's so important. And social is one of those things, like, it's a, what's the word? It's like it's a data point that shows all the other problems we have. When you stop spending time with people and you become more isolated, it's
Yeah.
because all the other things in your health, you're just like, you're letting kind of take over. You're letting technology take over. You're not getting enough sleep. You're not getting exercise. You're eating crappy food. You feel tired. And it just, all these different things contribute to you not like saying, yeah, I want to hang out or this or that, or being able to like stay awake or listen or have energy. It's all connected.
Oh, it's so true. And I mean, we don't have to go on the COVID rabbit trail, but one thing I think socially, this is changing things in a really negative way. Like I was just on a hike yesterday and I like I'm about to pass somebody and they put on their masks and turn their back to me and go hide in the bushes while I walk by. And
so psychologically.
For me, I was like, oh my gosh, am I like so contaminated? Like it's mind blowing what it's doing to our social
What's going to do
climate.
to kids? What's that going to do to kids?
Exactly.
Kids walking around with masks. Kids walking around, oh, don't touch me, germs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
when the reality is things like herd immunity and the people around sharing germs, doing all these things, like this hyper stale environment we're in is actually, you want to know what that does? It actually makes the perfect vector for viruses to just hop around uncontested.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just unbelievably absurd.
Yeah.
2020 is the most absurd year of my life. Like we don't even get into it, but it's like literally, it makes everything that I'm talking about so much more important. And that's not even talking about like the politics or the money or the crap that's going on in the government. Like it's unbelievable. And at the end of the day, people need to take ownership of their health and they take ownership of the negative effects of their environment. Yeah. Phone, technology, not going outside ever. People are literally afraid to go like in their yard and get sunlight. At least they were more in the beginning. I'm sure some people are still doing that, right? And this is all built on fear mongering and political gain and really bad, inconclusive data. It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's so sad for the future.
Yeah. No, I agree. All right. So is there two more?
There's two bonus principles. I'll just go into real quick. So bonus principle number 7 is self-awareness. Yes. And so the more self-aware you are as a person, the better you're off in every way. I just can't think of a better metric. Like your relationships, your job, your career, the work you do, why you get angry, like understanding what makes you tick. And of course, evolutionary psychology can help you do that, right? Like, why do you succumb to confirmation bias? Why do you succumb to hindsight bias? There's like over 100 different biases that they've identified that humans fall victim to on a regular basis. And again, this was because humans had to develop an operating framework in a tribal setting that made it so the group survived and raised offspring. That's all it did. Every single thing. Even racism is built into us in some way because of a fear of outsiders. Because in the wild, let's say your two tribes come together. One tribe's got war paint all over the face and big piercings in his stick, and you're kind of more of a peaceful tribe, and you're just like, whoa, who are those guys? Yeah. What do you think's going to happen if you're not afraid all the time? Right? If even 1 out of 10 times where the tribes just kind of go their merry way, if one of those chances that tribe basically dominates your tribe, takes women and children, kills all the men, which this has happened throughout history, you have to build a framework to which anybody that's an outsider is a threat to you. Yeah. Like that 2 sentences right there, if we could first establish that, okay, this is like a ghost of our evolution, right? We'll call it a ghost, right? That we have to try to identify it's there and mitigate it because we don't want to be racist and tribalistic or whatever. Instead, you just get a lot of yelling and screaming and blaming, calling people names. It just doesn't do anything. It's like, like you guys are all idiots. Seriously, literally all idiots. Most people on TV are idiots. It's unbelievable, right? And so we need to understand why we tick so that we can mitigate it, right? Mitigate it. It's the same thing. And so self-awareness is just a way of like, so you don't fall into traps that you don't need to fall into. Like understanding why you do things, why you want things. Most people don't even know what they want for their life. They're like, I don't know what I want to be or do, or I don't know what even makes me happy. I'm just doing what people tell me to do. It's like, what a terrible way to live life. And that's literally the default for most people. So wear a mask, be afraid. Don't question anything. Whatever they say on TV is the way it is. It's like, you're taking a big risk. Like I said in the beginning, that's a gamble. When you trust other people with your health, you're raising your kids, what you do, I mean, even your finances, and like, look what they're doing. They're literally spending down pensions. There's going to be no pensions. There's going to be no, Medicare or Medicaid, it's all going to collapse eventually. And it's like, the more people just, here, take my money, put it in the market, and then I won't pay attention, whatever. Like these are, I don't know how it kind of applies to self-awareness because at least you know what's going on. But it's like, you really just got to take ownership of your own life and build your own plan in future. And I just think we've grown up in a very kind of overabundant society. And it's made us egotistical, but it's also made us very fragile. It's deconditioned us, so that we think we don't have to take responsibility. We'll just let, you know, the news bits tell us what to do or think or feel or whatever. And it's like, that is not like, look throughout history. How'd that work for Nazi Germany? How'd that work for Mao's China? How'd that work for Soviet Union, Russia? Like, how's it working in Venezuela right now? The lira just collapsed. They're having hyperinflation. Most of the people are trying to sell their homes and cars to get into gold because the entire economy is going to collapse. It's like, I just think people they're in it for a rude awakening. It's unfortunate. And for me, it's always about like, if you want to not be aware, not take ownership of your life, not be self-aware, that's fine. But I just really, really feel for the children that have no freaking say in the matter. And that just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So self-awareness can help with that.
Yeah. How do you stay self-aware? Like, what keeps you self-aware? What are some of your...
Well, experiencing death is a big one. Like, you know, you can't really replicate that, but there is a technique that the Stoics used to use called negative visualization. It's the idea of, you think about somebody you love. I mean, even my son, I've thought about before, what would happen if he died? Like, he's 2, right? Like, that's morbid. Like, I don't want to think about that, but it brings a certain kind of acuity and awareness to his mortality, to when he's around. Am I on my phone? Am I paying attention to him? You know, am I paying attention enough so that he's more safe and more careful? And I've always been kind of a safe person. My dad kind of programmed that into me. And I think he has that as well. He's kind of a safe baby. He's not always like jumping off things as much. I'm sure that might change when he's like 4 and 5, but it's like, it realigns your focus to what matters. That's what negative visualization is supposed to do, right? Like I said, you know, imagine you're on your deathbed and you didn't do any things you wanted to do. You just followed the easy path. And usually the easy path is just easy because you don't want criticism. Yeah. But think about how powerful of an effect that is, right? And that's why evolutionary psychology is so fascinating, because we can understand these things clearly. But are you going to then wake up and tell your parents, I'm not going to law school because I don't want to be a freaking lawyer? You know, like, think about how hard that is. Even if you understand why you're doing it, even if there's like this fear of being kicked out of the group, which in the wild would have been a death sentence, right? Like, that's what this is. Anything you did to threaten the status quo in a group, they could have killed you, or they would have exiled you, which is the same. It's a death sentence. In the wild, nobody survived on their own, right? So anytime you're in a group and you have any kind of social status, you're always trying to maintain that, right? And anything you do above or below, even bullying is connected to this. I've actually looked into this a little bit. Why do kids bully other kids? Because they perceive them as lower in the group. In some weird, twisted way, they're trying to maintain homeostasis where everybody's equal, right? You see this, a lot of animals will eat the young that are weak. The Spartans apparently used to, I mean, it's not great, but they would basically kill the young if they had like deformities. Yeah. Right? Again, understanding, not replicating, like, we're not doing these things. Exactly. We have a completely different world today, right? And we're better off for it. Yes. But all these psychological, the operating system that's built into us, we have to overcome it. You know, it's like we get this like kind of built-in, like Microsoft DOS or whatever built in, and it's like it's not really good. It's got bugs, viruses come in at all times or whatever, and it's like we need to constantly be, you know, coding that to be better, right? And that's why self-awareness is huge, because if you don't understand like why you got angry at this thing or whatever, and why you freaked out, like you know when people have freakouts, they have no idea where it even came from. It's like they have all these pent up things, they have no idea what's going on. Right. And like therapy can be good, meditation, mindfulness, just like asking yourself hard questions, having hard conversations instead of hiding behind a screen. People today just want to hide behind a screen. They don't even want to tell people the truth. They want to text it to them. Yeah. People don't even want to break up with somebody. They want to text it to them or just start ignoring them because they don't want to deal with like the pain or struggle of having to go through that. And it's making our species fragile. Yeah. It's a shame. Yeah. So there's one more and then I'll let you go because I know it's a lot. So action bias. Okay. So this is a bonus principle, obviously being an entrepreneur and just anything I've seen with people that are generally happy in life, they take action, you know, like you can talk about things all day. You can read books all day, but if you don't translate that into action, you know, what is it? It's just, you know, thoughts in your head. And so the more you take action, and again, like the path of most resistance, the more you can do that, the more you can just like take the stairs, the more you can just, you know, clean up your room. I don't know, like anything you're putting off, just be like, okay, I have a chance. Can I do this or just leave it? Just do it. Just do it. The more you do that, I call it like the action muscle. When you get in the habit of taking action and you build that muscle, well, what does it do? It gets stronger. It's like, it's so obvious, and this is why they talk about things like tiny habits. And there's a whole book, BJ Fogg wrote a book about tiny habits. And it's this idea that when you're setting goals, most people have these grand ideas. They have these grand plans. I've done it myself. My productivity routine, every like 6 months, I'm like, I'm going to revamp it. It's going to be perfect. I'm going to like work 10 hours a day. I'm not going to miss a beat. It's going to be perfect. And I literally like the next day after I build this amazing thing, it never happens. Right. So what I've instead focused on is I've reversed it. You try to take a few integral things you're going to do every day, like the one thing, deep work, things like that. And you make it so that every day I do that, I'm winning. And then when that's solidified into habit, I can build on top of it. So they've done research saying, like, if you put your shoes, your trainers, like say for the gym, by the door, you're like, X% more likely to go to the gym just because you literally don't have to think about it. Right. Same thing with your clothes. Like if you're a girl and you like care about your outfit, lay the outfit out before, have it by your door, bed or whatever, put it on first thing and then go. Things like that. Right. And when you build those into habits, you build on top of that. So that's, action, bias, habits, it's all connected.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I know we probably have been going here for a long time.
That's a good convo. It's worth it.
Yeah, it's so great to kind of wrap it up, but I would love for you to talk about kind of like what are the next steps for wild foods, and also just could you share with us like how you stay inspired to keep doing what you do, because it's not easy work and you're not taking the easy route. And so like what keeps you motivated and inspired, and what kind of do we have to look forward to that's next for wild foods?
Yeah, that's one of those questions. Just like, well, how far back do I go? Because I have to like think, what's the origin? I've always thought about this. Like, what's the origin to why maybe I think differently than other people? Because I mean, honestly, with the internet, everybody has the opportunity to build whatever life they want. It's amazing. And I know I focus on health, but I'm also focused on life and autonomy. And like, I'm very distrusting of government and different things like that. And I want to have complete and pure sovereignty and freedom for myself and my family. Mm-hmm. So that only comes by being willing to just accept, inconvenient truths, so
that's so good.
It's like, I don't know what the origin is. I mean, I was raised in a certain way. Maybe this is actionable for people that have kids. I'm going to try to convey this to my son as well. My dad was always very, he kind of bragged about us. Like he would like do it in person. He'd be like, oh, look, they're so amazing. Look, he's in Taekwondo. He can do this amazing kick. He's like, oh, do the Jim Carrey impression. It was like always just something that was like amazing. And as kids, my sister and I are like, come on, Dad, stop. Right. That typical thing. But I kid you not, that built something into my psyche. Right. I just always have confidence that if I'm willing to commit, like if I really want to do it and I commit to it, I'll figure it out and I'll do it, And so I think a lot of people don't have that, they don't have that kind of mental model in their mind. There's always like some kind of doubt or what if I fail? And then I don't know, I've always just not cared what people think. Like I'm just willing to do it. And I've always kind of had a little more forceful personality. And I honestly don't know how to give people advice for that. I would maybe say a little bit at a time, control your environment, get rid of the big stressors. Like I'm so allergic to negative people that now
so great. Yeah.
Like if it comes out even for a second, I'm just like, nope, stop, and it's like, or I'll remove myself. Or there's even a good story of this rich guy I read. He had a bunch of people over, they were like hanging out at his house. They turned on some like gossip show and he was sitting on the couch and he just literally got up and left. And so one of the other guys, Sam, was saying like, well, why'd you do that? What's that about? He's like, I don't even let negativity into my brain, and this all ties back though to your environment. You are the people you spend the time with. You are literally a byproduct of your environment, right? Your food environment, how much you sleep, how little you sleep, the screens, the technology, the lights, the indoors, outdoors. You're a byproduct of your environment. And most people, they're just swimming in whatever aquarium they're in. And they never think, oh, let me like jump out of this fishbowl and do another one. Right. But that's what you have to do. Like, that's the most important thing. So there's a lot of stifling things in people's lives, usually people. So much just comes down to people. Like I said, we're social creatures. This makes sense. Right. And you got to mitigate that. You got to find ways around that. Maybe you have to counterbalance like the negativity of your family by finding a tribe outside your family that you can spend a lot of time with or whatever. I'm not saying you have to like fire everybody in your life. Right. But but if you're like in an abusive relationship where you have people that are leading you to do drugs you want to do, or like the really big things, yeah, those people got to go. They can't be around. You can't even text them, block their number, right? Even if it just means you detox from them for like a year and then, maybe you introduce them back in your life. Maybe you don't, right? Like people, I think sometimes have so much guilt and shame built into them. And that's actually another thing maybe we can close out on. The guilt and shame is, I think guilt and shame are like the two of the most toxic like viruses in our culture, right? Because they lead people to doing dumb things. They lead people to living lives they don't want to please people they don't really care about, or they don't really care about them or whatever. Or to live, somebody else's vicarious idea of, of your life. It's like the amount of suffering, even in an abundant, safe place like America, the amount of suffering is astronomical. We have physical suffering, we have mental suffering, we have kids now suffering, we medical, like it's, people just need to really build their own belief system and their own values. I feel like instead, most people are just osmosis. They just absorb whatever's around them. Instead, go inside and make it go outwards, right? Build those belief systems, right? That's basically leadership. And you don't have to like be a leader on a podium or whatever. You can just literally be somebody that leads by example, and you don't even have to say anything about it. Just do it. Because this is what I've seen with people when it comes to diet, like to your point about like making criticisms. I've seen this from multiple friends and family. Years later, right? Like for example, a friend of mine, her mom and dad always used to say stuff. And then like now they're like 50, 60 and they're like struggling with their weight and now and maybe even health problems. And like, you know, so what and they start asking questions.
Yes.
Now they're interested, you know? And it's like, but you don't say, I told you so. You don't do that at all because that'll just push them away. You don't want to do that, right? So you just encourage them, you nudge them subtle, right? And you continually lead by example, right? So, you know, to answer the question, I guess I want to see more individual thinkers that are willing to challenge the narrative, challenge the status quo, take responsibility for their life, think for themselves, you know, do their research rather than just like listening to what some pundit on TV says, right? Or what one article says. Like the amount, like that's the other sickness, getting worldview from the media, which is like, I mean, either social media or the traditional media. We're talking about most of the population.
Yeah.
That's how most people, that's how they wake up every day, and what they think and say is based on what they're fed through a screen. Yeah. I mean, it's like, what? That's why I've been saying, I think that the internet is the greatest existential threat to our species because it's letting these bigger powers that be that control the narrative and the information, it's letting them infect millions at such a rapid scale that like Hitler would have only dreamed of. They had to go through the newspaper when he wanted to feed propaganda. Today, they can just literally put out a thing or some ads or whatever, and it's live like that. Or Twitter instantly. Right. You know, so
many.
What's next for Wild Foods is, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, and so many of us are just going to take that at face value and not dig deeper or do the research at all. I mean, it's just, unfortunate.
If people knew how manipulated and biased all of it was and how easy it is to cherry pick data. I mean, if you even just look at research, like the nutrition research landscape and how backward it's been for years. And we're talking about what's established science. We're talking about what thousands, potentially millions of doctors and researchers have established is like right, but it's been completely wrong.
Right.
I mean, we're talking completely wrong. We're not even like saying like they're on like a right track. They're saying saturated fat is bad when saturated fat is one of the most essential nutrients for healthy human animals, right? Like it's like they've been so off the mark, it's not even funny. And you want to go then take that same, idea and like apply it to like the doctors that you trust blindly. You know how many people die from medical error every year? It's more than die from accidents, like car accidents and things.
Wow.
And just like medical error in the medical establishment, which people are there probably because they're overweight and shouldn't be there in the first place, right? 350,000 people a year die from that. Okay. 700,000 die from heart disease, completely preventable disease. It's about 550 or whatever for cancer. 1,000 a year die. Okay. Medical error is right up there right after that. Right. And then it goes down. Diabetes, all these other chronic lifestyle related diseases are at the top 10 of the list. Right. I think accidents is there, which is like pure freak accidents. That's like the only thing that is not a preventable lifestyle related disease. Right. Talk about mismatch of our environment and then blindly trusting the people that literally perpetuate it, whether on purpose or an accident, pharmaceutical, big medical, and the government with all the big food companies that spend millions, potential and billions of dollars marketing their freaking toxic crap. Yeah. So the question was wild foods, right?
Yes. What's next?
We are just going to keep doing what we're doing. We're always looking for like new products to launch, like usually based on like if I feel a gap in my routine, we're looking to like some sleep products, some magnesium products. I've been taking a lot more magnesium myself. Been taking some elderberry lately we got an elderberry with vitamin C and zinc. Obviously it's immune boosting. So that's very, relevant today. And just keep focusing on purity and quality and then just getting these ideas and messages out there, going on podcasts like yourself, which I appreciate. It's very important. Like this medium is like, I see as like, the freedom fighters, right? The podcast medium is just like, let's get let's get the truth out there, or let's at least get people thinking about how to question what they think is the truth when a lot of times it's not the truth. And so that's why podcasts are so important.
Oh, I agree 100%. And you've shared so much really valuable information. So thank you so
Pleasure to be here.
much. Before we go, I want to make sure listeners know where to find you and what's the best way to support the work and the mission of Wild Foods.
You can find me at colin.coach, and I'm on Instagram, Colin Stuckert. Wildfoods.co. You can actually use code WildCEO for 12% off your entire order. Yeah. And we have wild fish oil there, which is one of the best fish oils on the planet. It's, French Sea certified. It's actually one of the only fish oils in the world that's processed in the United States and caught in U.S. waters, which is very unique. All the other fish oils on the market generally are caught in, off like Argentina, Spain, and a lot of these are overfished areas. So like wild fish oil is always that product I'm just always so proud of. We've been able to find such a great supplier, and they own the fishing boats, like down to the captains, and like the whole supply chain, is literally basically owned, and tracked and everything. So I love that. My son loves it. He literally takes swigs of it. It's lemon flavored. And then we have obviously a bunch of other things like collagen, and we have, matcha. We have really great coffee roasted in Austin. We have something for everybody. And so if you want to support, your health and what I'm doing, you can go over there. And then of course, just follow me. I'm also on YouTube, Colin Stuckert as well. I've been doing a lot more over there with health and diet and nutrition and everything. And then we have the Ancestral Mind podcast, which maybe we can have you on, come on and share your story. Cause I feel like I don't know anything about you, but I know, but I've told you everything. Yeah. And so, we'll, share that with your audience as well. So yeah, it's been fun. I appreciate it.
Yes. Well, thanks so much, Colin. You take care. Thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge, on our show.
Thanks again.
Thanks.